with NBA Hall of Famers, where they mentored and motivated inner city youth to reach for the stars. He was honored by the Charlotte Hornets in the inaugural Community Leadership Award in 2019 for all that he's done for the community. Governor Cooper recommended that the Charlotte Area Fund was awarded a $1.1 million unrestricted grant from the IKEA Corporate Foundation to provide support for families impacted by COVID to expand our services. Nick initiated CAF's Community Action Week, where we were awarded with the 2019 Community Action Week proclamation by Mayor Vilaus, that to be celebrated the third week of every June. The first Community Action Week brought in 50 community health care providers in both dental care and other healthcare needs for over 100 of those who have been disenfranchised. This occurred in conjunction with the Charlotte Area Fund hosting the National Community Action Conference here in Charlotte. Under Nick's leadership, Charlotte Area Fund was awarded the NCDOT Highway Construction Academy. This launched inside the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department Detention Center, where 7 residents' lives were changed for the better. Upon their return to society, they will all be hired by Blythe Construction. Sorry, lost my notes. The Foundation of Carolinas acknowledged Nick as one of 50 opportunity leaders involved in changing Charlotte's economic mobility. Nick is the vice chair of the board of directors of WFAE, Charlotte's national public station. Nick was instrumental in launching the race and equity diversity strategy that invested in small businesses and brought in effective journalistic reporting in Charlotte's Black and Brown communities. A very proud moment for Nick Wharton was providing closing comments for WFAE's annual meeting that hosted Ted Koppel, the award-winning ABC journalist. Nick currently chairs the WIE Champions, which is the Women's Intercultural Exchange of diverse male leaders who are building trust across race, culture, and gender groups. He also served on the advisory council for Levine Cancer Institute Minority Cancer Advisory Council. Lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge lovely wife, Regina Wharton, and their 3 adult children. Nick continues to bring significant change and strides to the Charlotte Area Fund, and I personally am humbled to be the programs director for this rapidly growing organization under Nick's continued progress. Everyone, please help me welcome our speaker for the evening, the president and CEO of the Charlotte Area Fund, Mr. Nicholas V. Wharton. Thank you.
You know,
I want to remind everybody, sorry, Nick, I want to remind everybody, please mute your phones, your computers, your laptops. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Ashley, for that incredible introduction. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm completely embarrassed by all of the stuff she mentioned, right? Because the work that we do here is clearly not for grandeur or fame or any of that. This work is not for the faint at heart, right? Everybody who's involved in this work is deeply involved in this work. So I just want to welcome everybody that's here this evening. Thank you so much for being here. You know, when I told my wife that coming out of this pandemic, you know, there were a number of people I could have asked to speak, right? It's always nice to have a motivational speaker, someone who you may not have get a chance to hear from, right? So I said, Regina, you know, I'm going to be the speaker because we've all been locked up in these little boxes. And so, you know, there's thoughts I have I want to share with clients that I don't always get a chance to share, because oftentimes I would get a chance to go to classes and talk about change. I said, this would be a great opportunity. I said, so what do you think, Regina? She says, well, you know, and anybody knows Regina, she's like, you know, crystal clear in her opinions about these things, right? She says, well, you know, it's a great idea. She says, you know, just you know, don't try to be too charming, too witty, too intellectual. Just be yourself. And I said, oh boy, let me think about that for a minute. You'll get that in a minute. right? She said, just be yourself. I said, okay, let me think about it, right? So then I realized I came back in my office, right? This is how deep she is, right? I came back in my office and I sat down and thought about what she was saying, right? And I looked up at my mantle over the fireplace, over the bookshelf. I saw this. And you just read that. Can you read it?
Be yourself. You're so damn. That's pretty cool, Nick.
That's my wife's humor. Be yourself. You're so damn good at it, right? Initially, I had some other thoughts, but then I got it together, right? Because usually, you know, I've been married now 40 years, so you know, we talk in codes. You know, she'll say one thing and she really means something else. It'll just take you a minute to get it, right? And so I thought that was a positive endorsement even to come and speak today. But let me just say this. These are incredibly difficult times. I realize that over 1 million people have lost their lives, far more around the world to the pandemic. We've all been locked in our homes, you know, looking through screens like this, I suppose, or you've just been going through a sort of cabin fever in some ways, right? And the sad piece, I really want to say this from the bottom of my heart, I offer my condolences to families that are still struggling with COVID-19. I realize we're coming out of, you know, this whole pandemic, but quite frankly, there are still people dying. Weeks ago, I realized, several months ago, I realized that we took part in a focus group. Many of our clients took part of a focus group to determine how COVID impacted their families. And all kinds of stories were shared, right? But one of the most troubling stories is this notion of vaccine hesitancy. This idea of multiple conspiracies about the vaccines. There are conspiracies that the vaccine puts some metal in your body. And in fact, one reputable doctor in Texas literally said that if you get a vaccine in your arm, it will make your body like a magnet, and you can stick, you know, writing pens to your head and they'll stick to you, right? People actually believe this stuff, right? Or that it would give you the virus and make you even sicker. There is an extremely small portion of individuals that have met with some illness or, God forbid, have passed away from this medication, right? The reality is that if Black and brown communities don't get more aggressive at seeking out this vaccine, more of us will be sick or die. And there may be folk on the phone on this call right now who think, you know what, I ain't taking that. You gotta be kidding me. I'm not taking it, I'm not interested. Do it for someone else. Because oftentimes you're living in circumstances with older people, and if they contract the coronavirus, it's even more deadly for them. So think about it for others. In some communities around the country, African American, Black and brown communities, vaccination rate is like 13%, 12%, right? That's really scary. So beloved, right? I love Black and brown people, but I'm in love with conscious Black and brown people who care about others. Our agency, we serve over 90% African American and Latino people. This past year, we've supported something like 1,500 individuals through the services of the people that are on this Zoom call, the staff that are here. As she mentioned, all those sort of accolades and those kinds of initiatives that I've been involved in. I just want you to know, none of that happens without the folk in this organization, right? None of it happens. No one makes it on their own in this world. No one. Not Bill Gates, not Oprah Winfrey, not Kanye, not any of these iconic figures, right, that you may look up to. We all are interdependent on each other, right? This pandemic has taught us that. You realize this year has been a breakneck year in terms of race relations. This country is facing a major choice to make. Today, as we speak, the Senate is debating, if you can imagine, right? Voting rights in this country, right? The ability or the access for people like you and me to be able to, exercise our American God-given right of representation, right? That's a problem, right? January 6th was still the most horrendous circumstance that we all witnessed. The potential insurrection of our government. And race played a major role in that. Throughout this country, the country is changing. The world is changing. It's becoming more diverse. It's becoming more Black and brown. And there are individuals in this country that are quite frequently afraid of what that means, right? They're afraid of what that means. They're afraid of losing power. You saw it play out, in stark color contrast right on your TVs. And so what we're about with this agency is a couple things. And Terry Howard hit it on the head. We're about helping individuals to develop the skill sets, the mindsets to be successful, not just individually, but also in their communities. We need every one of you. We need you engaged, and we need your children to be skilled up and prepared to assume their position of leadership. I'm looking at Summer Wells and this family. I can't take my eyes off of you. I really can't. So I'll just as an aside, years ago, I was at a presentation and Maya Angelou was speaking. And my daughters were sitting in the front row and my son. And Maya Angelou couldn't keep her eyes off of her. And after the presentation, I brought her to Maya Angelou to this university to speak. After, we went and talked with her. And we said, and she says, I know you saw me looking at your daughter. And my wife says, I did notice it. What was going on? She said, your daughter has eyes like black diamonds. And she is absolutely beautiful. So I'm looking at these young people here, and they are just adorable. And I just can't stop looking at them. So thank you for having them join us. That is just so sweet. It's just a wonderful thing. So thank you again. So this is the reality. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about change. And in a minute, my staff is going to put up a slide. I really want to talk a little bit this evening about a concept, right? That I usually have a chance to talk to as many clients as I can when I go to some of the classes, either Deborah Moncrief's class in Working Ready, or Malik Carrington's HVAC class, or the Broadband Fiber class, because everyone who comes to us is trying to change something. They either trying to change their own lives, they're trying to change their career, or they may be trying to change their children's lives, or they may be trying to change their communities. So this is what I'm going to take you through, what is usually a 2-hour, 3-hour presentation in about 15 minutes. And I guarantee you, it'll probably be the most interesting math formula you've ever seen. And I'll make copies for you after, and I suspect you'll want it. So let's just take it from the top. I'm going to make this quick and to the point. Let's throw this slide up. So this is the world that we're living in. I'm waiting on my staff to put the slide up.
My apologies, I'm coming.
That's fine. Take your time. Take your time. Take your time. And I'm going to make some connections to what's happening in the real world as well, so that you can really appreciate the state of affairs we are and the role that you can play in helping to change and shift our society. So here it is. Now stay with me on this. This is a complicated math problem that will be made simple. FD times V times FS times SS is greater than R. So what does that mean? Every country, every organization, every person has to face change. Oftentimes there are major change that's needed in life, right? Because none of us, right, have anything to do with the communities that we're raised in, or the families that give us birth. Many of us are faced with major changes, and we're asked, dilemmas rather, and asked to make a change. The first step to making a change is that you must first become sufficiently dissatisfied with where you are. Now, why is that important? Well, if we look at the presidential election that took part just the other day, masses of people of color, Black and brown people and women, they were dissatisfied with the current state of political affairs. So much so that they did something about it. Every day, we have clients that come to us with huge dilemmas, real challenges, right? And many of you know exactly what I'm talking about because we're celebrating you today, right? And you've come and you've been sufficiently dissatisfied with where you are. Being pissed off, though, is not enough. You have to have a vision. SD times V, you have to have a vision of what not being pissed off looks like. What does happiness look like? What does joy look like? What does it look like to provide the resources, for your family, for yourself, for your community? What does that feel like? You have to envision, you have to close your eyes and think, right? What does it take, right? How can I just envision this thing, right? Some great leaders have said, I have a dream, right? That dream was a vision, right? And it's so crystal clear, right? One day I asked a client when I was doing this presentation, I asked a young woman, she was white, she's 48 years old, she had lost her job. And I asked her, what's your vision for life? And she was in a computer class. And she said, I want to be a pastry chef. Pastry chef? What do you mean a pastry chef? She began to explain, and she explained it so well, you can almost smell the pastry. That's how much she had envisioned it. And after that, she started bringing pastries for everybody in the class. And it became clear that was one of her passions because she had a vision, right? She had it in her head and she wanted to do it. Many of you have visions. We've heard them. At the end of this talk, you're going to hear some folk playing out their vision, moving from sufficiently dissatisfied to vision, and then you must take first steps. So with any vision, you must take first steps, right? You can't just talk about it, you gotta be about it. And I know our case managers are constantly talking with clients, right? What's your vision? I got these challenges, what do you wanna do about it? The question is, what are you prepared to actually do, right? And they will help move you to the next step. But it's a shared opportunity. It's not just one way. You've got to really move something, right? You got to change some scheduling. You got to change some things. You got to ask some questions, right? So that's important. So first must be sufficient to satisfy with where you are. You've got to say, I've had enough. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Harriet Tubman said years and years ago, I would have freed more slaves if they knew they were slaves. What was she talking about? Those folk weren't sick and tired of being sick and tired of being slaves. But if you want to be free, come with me. And if you're with me and you're not quite sure that you want to be free, Harriet Tubman, she eliminated those people. Why? Because if you don't want to be free and you are people who want to be free, you're a risk to people who want to be free. Now, that'll hit you after a while, what I'm talking about. You have to leave some people behind, right, in order to be free. But that's got to be your vision, right? Sufficiently dissatisfied, times vision, times first steps, times a support system. As I said before, nobody makes it alone. Nobody, right? A support system is a system. It's a system of relationships that you can count on, that will nourish your soul deep down on the inside. They'll nourish your vision. They'll help you with your first steps. And if there's anybody in that support system that's not about that, they got to go, right? So my mother would always tell me, I know you by the people that hang out with. So no matter what I thought I was up to, If I was hanging out with some scariest kind of individuals, she didn't believe it. And I know through conversations I've had with many clients, and I know our success coaches have had them as well. When we begin to talk about relationships, whether it's in a bad relationship with a male or a female, or someone in your immediate circle that's not healthy for you, one of the things I've always said, if those people who are not healthy for you, if at some point in time they say, where's Rachel at? Where's John at? I don't see him anymore. That means that you're unavailable to them. But if you're not hearing that, you're connected with them, right? So you really have to lead by example. You need a support system. And a part of the support system is knowing the difference between help and support. Now, if this were a class, I would ask you, I'd simply pose the question to you. If you didn't know how to swim and you were in 4 feet of water and you were out trying to paddle and you started slipping and you started, not catching your breath, would you need help or would you need support? Most people would say, oh, I need support. I just need to be able to stand up a little bit. I'm okay. That's all I need. But I said you can't swim. People can drown in a bathtub. And some noted people have, right? So if you can't swim and you're in 4 feet or in a pool, you can't get it together, you need help. Help is what you need when you can't do something for yourself. Now, women are much more prone to ask for help because they communicate, they talk to each other, right? They talk, they collaborate. But guys, Lord help me, they're guys, and the women on this call know, you're driving a car and you don't know where you're going and he's driving, he won't ask for help. You'll be driving around for hours. It's a shame, right? But there's something deep down on the inside with men that we don't want to be vulnerable. You see, I spent a lot of time, working in before a career. One of my first careers out of college, I worked with incarcerated young women. They were 15 to 18 years old in upstate New York. 95% of those women were there because of a dysfunctional relationship with male, right? And so that was their downfall. Also, I spent time taking basketball players into Auburn State Prison, upstate New York, one of the most notorious prisons in the nation, and Attica Prison. And I can't tell you the number of men I met who were in prison during a long time for issues of just simply being disrespected. Someone stepping on their foot, some slight, and they took it to a whole nother level because our egos as men were so fragile. We're so fragile. And so we don't ask for help, right? So it's really important, the work that our success coaches are doing and the clients that are so successful, which you are, and you know what I'm talking about, you know how to ask for help. And you know how to use support that encourages and moves you forward. So let's go over what we've learned. Sufficiently dissatisfied times vision, times first steps, times a support system, and all of that must be greater than resistance. Now, what do I mean by resistance? Well, resistance is the same issues that brought you here. Some of the same factors that have been barriers for you. It might be something in your head, it might be your scheme, it might be an addiction, it could be, anger management, it could be a whole range of situations, right? And we're not even talking about the systems issues that are in our way. Discrimination, right, on race and gender and LGBT and the systemic structural situations that we find ourselves. We're not even dealing with that right now. We're dealing with you, right? So you've got to make sure that you get a strategy to deal with the resistance. What is in your way? And it can't be how other people define you. As I mentioned before, none of us are in charge, have anything to do with the families that give us birth or the communities that raise us. But you are accountable. You are accountable for changing your circumstance and the people around you. We are all leaders. Some of you may not have thought of yourself as leaders. You are leaders. Why? Someone is always watching you. Always watching you. I'm talking all this stuff to you. If I don't practice it, it doesn't mean anything. I talk to parents, and I know my staff talk to parents and say, oh, these kids are a pain in the butt, right? They won't do what I say. Well, guess what? They're not going to do what you say. They're going to do what you do, right? So you didn't know this was a parenting class tonight. But what I'm saying is this. There are many clients that will take this change formula that I'm putting up here and put it on the wall of their refrigerator, and they'll reflect on it. There's another little quick story about this. I remember I did this presentation for a group of, and I think Malik Carrington is on the call. He's our HVAC guy. I remember I did a presentation like this for a group of men who were taking our HVAC class. And I went through the SD times V times FS, and I got an important call, and I couldn't finish this presentation. It's a long presentation. I just gave you a summary of it, very small summary of it. And I had to leave, right? And I had to come back the next day to do it. Well, this young man who was sitting in front of the classroom on Tuesday, he was there on Wednesday. And he says to me, Mr. Wharton, man, that formula was some nonsense, man. He says, I took that home and I told my wife or my girlfriend, I'm sufficiently dissatisfied with her. And my vision is that she needs to get a little job. You know how that went. That didn't go well at all. Not even close to it. What he forgot was, this is not for other people. This is for you, right? You got to absorb this for yourself. It may not ring true or relevant for you right now, but I can tell you it will ring true for you by and by. Because the world we're living in right now, you have got to be skilled and prepared emotionally, culturally, right? And we have to prepare our children for the future. We've just celebrated Juneteenth. Wow, what an experience, right? We celebrated Juneteenth. That was the day that the folk in Texas learned that Black folk were free, right? And the reason why it took so long for them to learn it, because we didn't own the communication system. We couldn't tell ourselves the truth. Today, there's a brutal, brutal attack on multicultural education, on education teaching us about who we are, right? So we got to go get it for ourselves. In Yoruba, there's a concept called Sankofa. What that means is you have to go back and fetch it for yourself. You got to go back and get your education for yourself, because it's not going to be given to you. In some states right now, they're barring multicultural education, or what some have called critical race theory, multicultural education about yourselves. Many of you saw Dreamland, the story of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the massacre. There are folk in Tulsa who grew up in Tulsa who never even knew about the massacre in their own town because it wasn't taught in schools. And there's a history of our greatness that we have to go back and fetch it. And one of the reasons why there's so many people of power resisting the education about African Americans and our true contribution in this country, and Native Americans and Latinos and others, is because there's a fear that white children will learn it. And they too will learn the truth, right? And they too will feel empowered. Because these young people today, maybe you don't have the same racial barriers. There are lots of communication you have across culture and difference. And it's a rich thing, but folk are afraid of that. And you have to be the vanguards and the champions of that. And you got to start in your own home. And you've got to be healthy. I tell you, when I talk about this, I get emotional. We've got to be healthy. Our community, they're at risk right now. And I need you all to be champions in your own home, right? That's really important. Because if we're not healthy, if we don't eat healthy, we all have various pre-existing kinds of illnesses, right? That are kind of pulling at our souls. And we're watching people around us die too early. My mother died in the 50s. She died of throat cancer. My dad died when he was 60, right? I'm now past their age, which is kind of weird, right? And I want you all to live past, your parents, your grandparents' ages. So you've got to get healthy, right? We got to get strong because we're in the fight of our life. We're in the fight of our life. Does that make sense? But we're in it together. We're in it together. Those babies, we're in it together. So I thank you. I didn't want to talk too much longer, but I'm just really excited about how you are changing and shifting your life. Don't let anybody tell you that a short-term certification here is not as good as any degree that you can get. This is really a stepping stone to something great. To something really, really great, but you got to believe it. You got to believe it. You just simply have to believe it. Today, after I speak, there'll be a couple of testimonies of folk who they didn't have this presentation on change formula. This is not rocket science. This is not something that, Mr. Wharton, he's so bright, he put this together. No, this is how people think. This is how it just happens natural in many cases. But you got to really resist. You got to barrel through the fears in your life. Many times the fears that we all have, and let me be clear, we've got folk on this call that have been incarcerated, right? That are out and making moves. So they've had bad things that have happened to good people, right? But fear in many ways is false evidence appearing real, FEAR. And what I mean by that is the worst things that you fear will probably never happen. They're in your head. You're telling yourselves these things. We got to reprogram how we think about who we are, and don't get me to preaching about whose we are, right? You understand what I'm saying? We have to reprogram our thinking because we got big things to do and we need everybody on board. We can't afford to lose anybody else. Thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.